Retro.
And welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Animanicast.
People are always asking me, how do you keep your act fresh?
Practice.
This kid's got more talent in his little finger than he has in his big finger. But seriously, you got to keep it fresh. It's tough to do, and like me, you're from Flushing, New York. The Tidy Bone Man was just elected mayor. What do you think of Flushing, New York?
I think it's a good idea.
And welcome, everybody, once again to the Animanicast. This, of course, is the podcast that is dedicated to the animated television series Animaniacs, as well as other shows within the Rueggerverse, such as Tiny Toon Adventures, Pinky and the Brain, and Freakazoid. And today, we have a very special episode. I am Joey, and joining me once again from somewhere in the Pacific Ocean, it's my brother Nathan.
Hey, aloha, Joey.
And across the country in Georgia, there's Kelly.
Hello.
Joining us once again is our friend. It's the creator of Animaniacs himself. It's Mr. Tom Ruegger.
Where am I? What am I doing here?
Good question. The bigger question is, how the heck did we get this next person on? You guys might know him as an animator, or maybe an animation director, or perhaps even, I don't know, he was the founder of StarToons. That's right. We talk about him quite often over the past 7 years on our show. It's Mr. Jon McClenahan.
Yay!
Wait a minute. You guys have been talking about me?
Yes. All good stuff. All good stuff. I promise. I promise.
All right. Well, hi.
Welcome.
From the Ozarks.
That's right. The Ozarks. He's drawing all the trees.
Yeah. I'm drawing with the trees.
Yes.
Because they haven't invented pencils out here yet.
Well, thank you so much, John, for coming on. I got to give a little bit of a backstory how this all kind of tied together. I was our friend Joanna Davidovich, who has been on the show before, old school Animaniacs fan and amazing artist and animator, does these live streams on YouTube and all of our other streams. And you get to, request some drawings and talk to some people about cartoons. And wouldn't you know it, John was right there in the chat. And of course I freaked out and, it was like, get on the show with us. And Joanna was, kind enough to wrangle, John in, for an interview. She gave us a lot of kind words. So thank you, Joanna, for helping put this all together. And, of course, when I told Tom that, Jon McClenahan was coming on the show, he's like, oh, I got to be on here too to talk about this. So it's wonderful to have you guys both on to talk about your work with not only animation, but of course working on Animaniacs, which we love. So I think, John, I think we better get started right at the beginning. How did you get started in the animation business to begin with?
Yeah, good question. It's a long story. I guess we got time. I'll start. I'll talk as fast as I can. So I always enjoyed drawing as a kid, but I had two older brothers who told me you can't make money drawing. So they thought, okay, you need to, get into something that's going to pay. And I took, they're my brothers, so I had to take their advice or they would beat me up. So we, I was doing a lot of different things. By 1980, I was already married. I had a couple of kids and I was driving a meat truck and, in Chicago and, which is where we lived at the time. I was getting, I'm kind of a tall guy, and I used to have to carry these a lot of heavy meat products, like, cow legs and chuck roasts and stuff. I mean, stuff that weighed like 150 pounds each. And I was getting a backache, and my wife, Christine, said, "John, when I married you, I never thought you were going to be a meat man. You can draw. Why don't you do something with that?" So I guess I have to credit my wife for kicking my butt to get out of the meat truck and start. So anyway, I took some art courses at the local school at American Academy of Art in Chicago. And then I was talking to a friend who had lived in Chicago and who had moved to Australia. And I said, "Yeah, I think I'm thinking about getting out of the meat truck business." And he said, "Why don't you come down to?" I'm trying to do an Australian accent. "Why don't you come down to Australia and see what we got down here, mate?" And so the long and the short of it is, there was a Hanna-Barbera studio in Sydney, Australia, and I ended up getting a job there. So we ended up moving to Australia, and for the most part, I worked with Hanna-Barbera for the next 8 years, 80 through 88, the Reagan years. And I kind of, I went from, an in-betweener to I got a sort of a sideways kick into the animation checking department, where I did animation fix-ups for a while. And I kind of promoted myself to animator.
Now, how did you do that? How did you promote yourself?
I shouldn't mention the guy's name, but our director at Hanna-Barbera in Australia, he used to spend most of the week down at the pub. And his style was just to sort of, he did a lot of work on the X sheets and stuff. He would prepare X sheets for the shows. And then he would, when he finished, he'd go down to the pub. And then when a show was ready to look at, when the editor had compiled all the scenes into one show, he would come and call reshoots. And he'd do about half of them himself. And then he'd go back to the pub. So he wasn't really paying attention. And we got a new girl in the office named Lynette. And I kind of sweet talked her. I says, I think I could animate. I think it'd probably be, anyway, I talked her into it. She gave me a sequence of scenes from the show Laverne and Shirley in the Army. Oh, gosh. Embarrassing, but true. Anyway, the bottom line is I finished my sequence and turned it in, and nobody said anything. So I asked her to give me some more. And before you know it, I was just on the roster as an animator.
That is great.
And, yeah. So, but I was motivated. I mean, that's the thing about Australia, is normally those guys are just really taking it easy, and they're, happy to have a job so they can drink beer on the weekends. And I was, as an American, I was motivated. So I wanted to get ahead. And so I'd bring a sleeping bag to work sometimes. And I'd work so hard because, man, I thought, this is so much better than driving a meat truck.
I'm just looking at your IMDb page, and I'm seeing quite a few shows that I remember watching as a kid. Of course, there was the Pac-Man series as an animator, the Berenstain Bears, and it was, we have to confirm, it was definitely the Berenstain Bears, right? Not the Berenstein Bears, like it was not the Mandela
That's
effect.
correct.
Okay, good. Yeah. So there you go.
Right.
No alternate dimensions going on. Very good. And Teen Wolf is one that I remember watching as a kid.
Oh, I remember that one.
Yeah, the Teen Wolf show. That
was the first show I directed.
Oh wow, yeah. That I really liked watching that every Saturday morning. I think that was CBS, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know. And of course Pound Puppies, which that was 1987. Were you working on Pound Puppies at that time as well, Tom?
Yes, and there were scenes. We get the Pound Puppy episodes back from Australia. I was a story editor, so I was not a producer, not calling retakes or anything. But I was noticing every now and then there'd be a shot in the Pound Puppies show that was just like fully animated and with real style and panache and like Whopper would suddenly have this big smile and he'd be adorable and he'd be moving better than he ever had. It wasn't just a model sheet, he was just a full alive character. And I thought, well, this guy, who's this guy? Who's doing this? Can we get him to do the whole show? And so we sent a note to Australia, said, hey, these scenes, whoever this animator is, can we have him do the entire show? And they wrote back, no, you can't do that because he's busy. But it was Jon McClenahan. It was Jon McClenahan.
Wow. That is so weird. I had no idea that you knew who I was, Tom Ruegger.
Yep.
Before I came back.
Well, then we found you later in an elevator, but we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Pound Puppies. It's funny. I don't actually remember much about it. Tom, I am so amazed to know that anybody in Los Angeles was taking notice of the stuff I was doing on Pound Puppies. But my approach to animation has always been to just make it as appealing as possible, particularly because I tend to miss the model sheet pretty badly all the time. So I try to make up for it with, good acting and good action and, fun stuff. And so like, I do remember with Pound Puppies, I thought, man, these model sheets are boring. Can't we do something with these? And so, and in Australia, of course, in a place where I could promote myself because the director was drunk, it was like, okay, I'll just take some liberty with the model sheets. And apparently they liked it. So I was happy to hear about that. It was at a time, 87 was at a time when the whole Silver Age thing was starting. And there was a lot of talk amongst animators about, we're going to start doing some cool stuff again instead of just Laverne and Shirley in the army, So there was an excitement building in the industry there in Australia. We had, I don't know if who killed Roger Rabbit or whatever, Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I don't know if that film had come out yet in 87, or it came out in 87 or 88.
Yeah, I believe so.
When we saw that, and we were kind of having our own little renaissance there in Australia, we were starting to try and pick up our game at Hanna-Barbera, much to the chagrin of the management because it slowed us down. But it was a very exciting time. So we were all thinking, man, maybe we could start making cool cartoons again.
Yeah, awesome. And then you moved on to, did you then move on to Kennedy cartoons after Hanna-Barbera?
No, after Hanna-Barbera, they shut down in late 87. And so I moved back to Chicago because I didn't like being on the other side of the planet without a job. So I came back to Chicago. There was a local guy in Chicago I worked for a year. Nothing really to talk about there.
Except it didn't pay you.
Right. That was the problem. Yeah. That was the problem. It was like most of the people on the staff were not getting paid on a regular basis.
Oh boy.
And when he started not my wife will kill me if I don't come back with a paycheck. So, again, blame the wife, you know. but so yeah. So then I thought, okay, maybe I can just do it myself. And I started going around trying to meet some people and get some jobs of my own. And I started StarToons. So that it was me and the wife. Every once in a while we'd have an artist who would freelance for us, but for the most part it was just me. And yeah, we got some regular jobs. Well, then a friend of mine from Australia came to Chicago to visit, a guy by the name of James Baker. Now, James Baker, great artist. He had been a kid in Australia, came to Hanna-Barbera when he was like 16 years old, and everybody was treating him like crap. And so I kind of took him under my wing and, you know, tried to encourage him. And he ended up being a great animator, great layout artist, great, you know, just a great artist, great storyboard artist in the end. But he came and visited me in Chicago, and he stayed with us. And then he says, well, I'm on to my next destination. I said, where are you going? He said, I'm going up to Toronto. I said, okay, why? What's up there? He says, there's a few studios up there. So it turned out he was going to visit with Glenn Kennedy, who he knew. But he called me, my friend James called me from Toronto when he got up there. And he says, yeah, there's a studio up here who's doing some really cool stuff with Warner Brothers. And they need a lot of help because they've got a lot of work. And I bet you could get some work. And he knew I needed the work. So sure enough, I got in touch with Glenn, and he put me in touch with his production manager. They started sending me sequences of scenes from Tiny Toons that they were working on. And they sent me samples of the stuff that Glenn was doing. It looked interesting. It looked kind of reminiscent of John Kricfalusi sort of stuff. Very, very wild and exaggerated. And when I saw the model sheets that Warner Brothers had sent, I thought, well, he's really going off model here. But the thing is, when I would talk about, I said, am I supposed to make my stuff look like the model sheets or like Glenn stuff? They said, make it look like Glenn stuff because we're just throwing the model sheets away. We're not going to do it that way. And I said, isn't there a problem with that? And they said, no. They said, no, we're going to end up doing them all. All the other studios are going to do it like we're doing it.
Oh.
And I said, okay.
Everyone's going to be kicking.
Yeah, the famous kicking. I mean, look, here's the deal. Glenn I thought he was a very talented guy, and he had a particular style. But what I didn't realize was, first of all, I realized I wasn't able to draw like him, so I just drew like me. And I just kind of did stuff my own way. And I guess Warner's thought it was okay. I mean, when I would look at my stuff compared with his stuff, I thought this stuff doesn't even match. but somehow, that wasn't my decision. They just told me keep going, and I kept going.
Do you remember, John, some of the first scenes that you were doing on Tiny Toons?
Yeah, I do actually. The first show we worked on was Buster and the Wolverine.
Oh yeah.
And I got a lot of Wolverine scenes. and I think if you look at that one, if I don't know if you can pick out my scenes on it, I didn't really have a good handle on Buster or Babs either. But I thought my Wolverine worked all right.
Yeah, the Wolverine, I checked it out yesterday. He is ferocious looking, and a lot of pencil mileage on that Wolverine. I mean, there are a lot of teeth. I mean, not an easy assignment, really. I mean,
No, because he
Buster
had
and
a lot
Babs,
of stripes,
yeah,
stripes and stuff on his fur. And yeah, you're right. You're right.
and Buster and Babs were like simple, like they were like stick figures compared to the Wolverine, who had all sorts of stuff going on. He had 40 teeth, and he was drooling, and he was sticking his tongue. His eyes were popping it, and he was really, really alive.
Well, I had fun with him, and so that was the first one. It seems to me like they were going out of order because there was the original one. The original episode was called "The Looney Beginning," right?
Yes.
And we ended up working on that after Buster and the Wolverine, so I don't really understand how that worked.
Well, that was the show. That was the episode. I think it was like number like 27 or 37 of the production. And Steven kept saying, "Hey, I want to do a big elaborate opening episode where Bugs would introduce it, but then Buster and Babs would be popping out of the frames of the celluloid of the film, and it was going to be live action." And he kept insisting on this opening episode that was going to have all this crazy live action and shots that were physically impossible to make, certainly on a TV budget. And so rather than make this opening pilot episode, I just kept putting it off because I didn't want to hire a whole live action movie crew and make something that I didn't understand. And so then it got to desperation time because Steven kept remembering everything about this episode. Every meeting we'd have, he keeps saying, "Hey, when are we going to get going on that thing?" And
God.
Finally, we said, "All right, we're going to make it, but it's not going to have any live action." And he hit the roof. He was so upset and mad at me. But we boarded it, and we sent it off to StarToons. We sent it off to Glenn Kennedy, and he was getting lots of things done at painted at Cuckoo's Nest, I believe. And so he was over there in Taipei a lot. Glenn Kennedy was, and that particular episode, I think you did a lot of work on that. You did the animator, didn't you?
Yeah, the animator that was struggling to. Yeah, he was. I thought it was funny, this idea that animators were sitting there at their desk drawing things to try and come up with a series, because yeah, I've tried that a lot, but nobody ever bought it, So,
but the model was based on Charlie Bean, one of our artists and animators, and who went on to produce things. So that particular episode, we were so late that we actually, we made it by the skin of our teeth, by the air date. We were still cutting in retakes the day before it went on the air.
Okay.
Wow.
Well, yeah. Wow. Well,
Yeah.
that explains it, I guess. But I think I got to work on most of the ones that Kennedy worked on. And I would just, whatever he would send me, I'd work on it. And I remember there was one called High Toon, the take off on high noon, and I remember I did some animation of Wile E. Coyote as a Western outlaw. I saw that on YouTube recently. It's like people have made these compilations on YouTube of my stuff, which is really cool because it's like all this stuff that I'd forgotten.
Yeah.
But and then when I saw the stuff I did with Wile E. Coyote, I thought, I did a good job with that. That's good.
You worked on a lot of really good episodes, I thought, and you worked on the show after Glenn Kennedy stopped working on the show.
Yeah, I at some point started hearing stories about Glenn was in a fight with Warner Brothers, and I just thought, oh crap, that's the end of the work, I suppose. I was working on it, and I was hearing rumors that like Glenn had like ditched town or something. He had left or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it with that pilot thing, it really went south because we were way behind. Yeah.
There were two episodes I remember clearly that I really enjoyed. One was the Acme Bowl, because it portrayed the Tiny Toons characters playing football or something against Disney. Yeah. And except they were, what were they called?
Well, there was Perfecto Prep. Perfecto
Prep.
And
yeah.
Mickey Mouse was a guy named Roderick Rat.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And they were these guys they would meet in like these dark, it looks
like a coven.
It reminded me of like a Night on Bald Mountain sort of thing.
See, I remember Roderick Rat. I had no idea, like I being a kid at the time, that was a parody or a commentary of Disney and of Mickey Mouse and everything.
Yeah, and and a parody of their approach to animation, which was like it was almost cultic. It was like and that's one thing I have to thank God for, is that I've never had to work for Disney, because I just knew that if I had to work for them, that would be the end of having fun in my life.
Well, you did do a little bit of Darkwing Duck, right? Back in '91, you did a
I did.
few episodes.
That's when, yeah, Kennedy went over to Disney and started doing some Darkwing Duck, so he sent me some of that stuff too, and that was the point where I thought, you know what, I've got to get out to Warner Brothers and see if I can't pick up some work from them.
Yeah, so you were never completely put in that cult, essentially, for that.
No, yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
One of the things that I believe you worked on as well for Tiny Toons that really stood out as one of our favorites is Henny Youngman Days, which of course has the potty years with Baby Plucky.
Yes,
the animation,
yes.
Everything in that episode is just so the Tiny Toons just look so cute. Their eyes and there's something about the eyes of Baby Plucky and his like cheeks and just the roundness of everything, of how you styled him, that is just so iconic, I think. Maybe I don't know if you could speak to that.
That was the first episode that we got directly contracted from Warner Brothers. And it was like a 3-part Henny Youngman Day. He was going to be the host. And I can tell you a story about Henny Youngman too, but we'll maybe save that for another time. But anyway.
No, go ahead. Tell us about Henny Youngman. Tell us Henny Youngman.
Well, look, when we finished it, it was the first time any studio in Chicago had ever animated and produced a national TV series cartoon episode. And so I thought we'd have like a big event to celebrate it. We were going to screen it somewhere and invite all the local people, to try and say, hey, look at what we did here in Chicago. My secretary, secretary/office manager, actually was able to reach Henny Youngman, and she asked him if he would be interested in coming to Chicago to take part in this event. And so when she called, it's like he didn't have an agent. I guess he just did his own work. He booked his own gigs and everything. And so he answered the phone, and he wanted like $10,000 to do that. And we were like, okay, honey. thanks, but no thanks. But that was the end of that. I mean, he was still hustling, and he didn't give up. He was like, he says, "Look, you could sell tickets. You could make money on this." He's like, yeah. Well,
Henny would also at the recording session, he would like make sure that there was a corned beef sandwich waiting for him when he got there. Certain things he needed. He needed certain things. He needed like a certain kind of diet soda and what a character! What a great character he was. And he was always on. I mean, sort of like Jonathan Winters, but at the microphone, Henny was just doing jokes. It was endless.
Yeah, he's like a robot.
Yeah.
He just push the on button and he starts telling jokes.
So that was the first half-hour episode, national telecast episode of animation done at StarToons in Chicago. That was the Baby Plucky episode. And
Baby Plucky was in that. And what else? There was one about a lame joke. Right.
And there was Babs doing stand-up, I believe.
Yeah, stand up and deliver.
Yeah.
And I personally did the most work on stand up and deliver. And then I assigned Baby Plucky to Spike to do most of the animation. So between Spike and I, and Spike, when I say Spike, I'm talking about Brandt. Spike Brandt. Yeah. Chris Brandt. So, and that's another story, but Spike was just a gift from God to StarToons because he was just this local, great draftsman, terrific animator, great, easy guy to get along with. And he needed a job at the time when we needed an animator. So he ended up doing most of Plucky, the potty years. And I did, I probably did, maybe a fifth of it. And then he probably did 3 or 4/5 of it. And there were a few other animators contributed. But and now here's so apparently Steven Spielberg had made a rule that we were supposed to have a new background for every shot, every scene. Did you hear that rule?
Yeah, it was insane. It was insane.
It was insane. And I thought, what Steven doesn't know isn't going to hurt him.
Right.
Because most of the potty years was done in the bathroom.
Yeah, and it was like one set. Yeah,
it was one set. So it was like, I don't know. I think there might have been in that show, there might have been 150 shots. And I laid it out. And I thought, to heck with this one background per scene thing.
Oh my golly. Yeah.
I think we ended up using, 30 or 40 backgrounds, but we reuse backgrounds as much as possible.
Yeah, there was no reason to have even 30 backgrounds. That was really like, sort of a 5 background episode.
It probably was.
Yeah.
But, I didn't want to, you don't want to tangle with Steve.
Well, here's a story that we kind of skipped over, and we got to go back to it now with John, because so John came out to LA. StarToons was Jon McClenahan at that point, but he was trying to line up some more work. And so what happened? You came to LA, John.
Yeah, and we lined up as many meetings as I could, and I went out there with another friend of mine from Australia who had come to Chicago to visit, and he thought, he'd like to see Los Angeles. And then another fellow from Chicago who ended up working for me, named Ron Fleischer, and we went around. We took some meetings with prospective studios, and I met with Hanna-Barbera because they were still around at the time, I think, even though Bill was getting kind of old. And I had met Bill when we worked for Hanna-Barbera in Australia. He would come out to Australia, But then I was really interested in trying to get some of this Tiny Toon stuff from Warner Brothers. So their operation was in Sherman Oaks, I remember. And we went to Sherman Oaks and we met this guy and met that guy. And everybody was kind of giving us the runaround and kind of being polite. And, don't call us, we'll call you, sort of thing. And so I thought, okay, well, go have our next meeting, go back to the hotel and get drunk or something. And so we're going down the hotel, and the three of us are in the elevator. Sorry, we're going down the elevator. The three of us are talking and kind of, debriefing on what's been going on. And there's another guy in the elevator that we have no idea who he is, but we thought, okay, he's leaving the office too, but we didn't know who he was. And all of a sudden, this guy speaks up and he says, "Hey, so what are you guys doing?" And we didn't know. I thought, well, what's it to you, buddy? But I said, well, we've been trying to meet with some of these guys. We're hoping to get some work on Tiny Toons. And he says, well, do you animate? And I said, yeah, I've actually done some work on Tiny Toons, but I've done it through another studio. He says, what studio? I said, Kennedy Cartoons. And he says, well, what scenes did you do? And I said, I don't know. Let's see. And then I think I rattled off a few. And he says, well, my name's Tom Ruegger, and I'm the producer on this show. You could have knocked me over with a feather because I knew who Tom Ruegger was. I knew he was the creator, producer of Tiny Toons. And I just had never seen his face before. And he said, why don't we come back up to my office? I don't know what he was doing going downstairs. But anyway, we ended up going right back up and going into his office. And the next thing you know, he's arranging a test for me to do some, I don't know, some closing credit animation. And that was the beginning of my relationship with Tom. And it was just a wonderful coincidence that we ended up working together quite a bit over the years.
So Jon joined us with his colleagues that he gathered together to form StarToons. Right with that episode, with the Henny Youngman Day episode and Baby Plucky, and that episode was so beautifully done. It was a great vindication for both me and Jon, because when I sort of insisted that we give StarToons an episode to get them as a part of our operation, I was met with some skepticism, and they were like, well, the Glenn Kennedy thing didn't work out, and that's where, Jon was involved in, and, they're Chicago, they've never done it before. And I said, yeah, well, that's why we need to do this. But they hit it so far out of the park, people were just flabbergasted. They were just amazed. And so at that point, Jon was sitting in a very good position, and I wanted to give him everything we could give him. And I also, one of the great things about my job was that I was able to select which episodes went to which studios. Now, I knew we had good things going with Cuckoo's Nest and with TMS, but now we had StarToons as well. And so when we had something that needed a lot of personality, a lot of character, a lot of sort of really top quality animation, I like Fields of Honey, for instance, went to StarToons. 13 did 13 something go there? But anyway,
Yeah, that was our next one. And I think Fields of Honey was Kennedy cartoons, but I did work on it.
right.
But yeah, 13 something was the next episode we did after Henny Youngman Day.
And that's I believe that was one of Stephen's very favorite episodes, if I'm not mistaken.
I heard that rumor, and
Yeah.
I was really appreciative to hear that. I got that. I got notice about that right after I had just seen his movie Hook.
Right.
But I don't know if I should say this, but it wasn't my favorite Spielberg film.
I love Hook.
Is it your favorite Spielberg film, Kelly?
What?
Is it your favorite though?
It's
of
not
all
my
of his films.
It's not my
Okay,
favorite.
well, that's
but
exactly what.
That's what he said. It's not his favorite.
I get sensitive because so many people knock on Hook, and I just think it's beautiful, and I love the music, and I think it's great.
That's good, Kelly. That's good. Well, I thought it sucked.
See, y'all tried to defend him, but he doubled down.
He did double down. That is for sure. Yes.
That was great. Oh my God.
The whole thing is, I remember sending a fax back to Warner's because they had, I don't know, I think it was your secretary Kathy.
Kathy Page, yeah.
Yeah, she sent us. She said Stephen thought that was their best episode ever, and I said I sent a fax back. That's how we used to correspond back then. I sent a fax back to them saying, "Tell Stephen, thank you very much for the kind words, but Hook still sucks."
Oh.
And Kathy Page did not send that through.
No,
didn't she?
No.
Also, of course, later on, StarToons did It's a Wonderful Tiny Toons Christmas special. That's another episode that they did. They did great stuff on Tiny Toons, but then when Animaniacs finally came along, we wanted StarToons to be sort of like a major element of that production. So they were with Animaniacs from its inception.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Well, I think that is actually a really opportune time to pause, I guess, our discussion for today, because that was so informative and so much great information right there. But I think before we go into the Animaniacs years with StarToons and all the fantastic cartoons that you worked on that show, we could pause for today. But before we do, we'll get to a few questions from our listeners. And maybe Nathan, Kelly, if you saw any of the ones that kind of stood out.
This is one of the patrons on Patreon. I don't know who said this because it didn't say who said it, but
is it the first one?
No, it says, "Howdy do, John. I've got one question."
I'll look it up for you real quick as you're talking.
I'll read the question. You tell me who said it afterwards. All right. Okay. How do you do, John? I've got one question. Have you been influenced by Seamus Holhan, quick sketch exercise, or whatever? And how much of that has been used in the footage pumping process of drawn animation?
Okay, Seamus Culhane.
That's, by the way, is from Paul. I want to make sure that Paul gets a shout out for that great question.
Oh,
so there you go.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay, Paul. Howdy do. So here's the thing. Seamus Culhane wrote a famous how to animate book. I can't remember the title of it. Did he give the title there?
He did not.
Not that I see. He says it might be called Or Whatever.
I think I have it here. I'll go find it. You guys keep talking.
Okay.
All right. Well, anyway, yeah, Seamus Culhane. I had read his book through and through while I was at Hanna-Barbera in Australia. he is, of course, is a great animator, but he was really, his book was mainly about the nuts and bolts of producing animation. And I remember one of the things he said, as far as I know, this is a great piece of information. He said, when you're recording artist voices, the character voices, to let the actor do it his way. Don't ever try to make him say it a certain way. It's like, he's the actor. Let him do it as he sees fit, because that's what he does for a living. And I always thought that was a great piece of advice. But I will say, yeah, I mean, that book by Seamus Culhane had a ton of great information in it. I think he died shortly after I read the book, so I don't know. He was one of the great old men of Disney, and I don't know, I think he worked for Fleischer back in the day.
Yes, he did. Yep.
Yeah. So that's all I can say about Seamus Culhane, but he was a great man, great director, great artist, and a great source of information.
Wow. Thank you.
Did you ever find what that title was there, Tom?
No, I found Preston Blair's cartoon animation book, but it's not Seamus's book.
I see two books here: Talking Animals and Other People, and then Animation from Script to Screen by Seamus Culhane.
That's the one, Script to Screen.
Yeah. Okay.
That was the one.
Well, there you go. Kelly, I know that a lot of the questions that we got, on are dealing a lot with Animaniacs, but there's a few, I think, that deal with just kind of animation in general. Do you have any that you see?
Yes, they've been helpfully highlighted in blue for me.
Oh, good.
So.
Good job, Nathan.
This is from an email, sincerely from Christian. In a TV animation landscape where the vast majority of American animated shows are still outsourced to Asia or Canada, your former studio still stands as an exception to the rule, an American studio doing the animation itself for American animated TV shows. What do you believe allowed StarToons to thrive, even if briefly, in an outsourcing-heavy TV animation landscape? And why haven't there been more American animation studios doing animation for American TV cartoons?
Yeah, I think those are questions that I was asking myself when I came back to America. I was happy that I'd been able to get my start in Australia, but I thought, why isn't this happening in America? So that was certainly a question I was asking myself all the time. And of course, eventually, luckily, through God's blessing, I was able to meet with Tom, and the rest was history. But people have asked me that, how did you do it and how can we do it? And it's like, I'm just not sure it could happen again today, because I think you have to have somebody advocating for you. And it seems to me like nowadays, everybody who has the power to advocate has been sold on, the formulaic approach of this is how we make cartoons, and it starts by, farming it out to an Asian studio. Now, as far as I know, yeah, we were the first studio to do that. I don't know. I heard there was another studio in California that did a couple of episodes of Tiny Toons. Is that right, Tom?
No. Okay. Maybe in Nevada, very early on, and it was a disaster.
Yeah, I heard it didn't go well. So
yeah, they actually held an episode hostage because the quality was so low that we said, well, we have to cut you off, but if you'll send us what you have so far, we'll come to terms on that. And they said, no, we're not sending it.
I think I was just reading about that episode the other day, Tom. What was that? Because it was really a bunch of crazy off-model stuff. I didn't rewatch the episode, but I did see some shots.
I know Concord Condor was involved in one of the episodes. Poor Concord.
That was the end of his career.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I just thought, and here's the deal. I know that, another big consideration is that selling, the business aspect of these cartoons now it's a business model that I don't think is actually sustainable. It's like maybe 10 years ago, I was working on a thing for Nicktoons or something. And I found out that, these episodes that I was working on, I was just like a creative director on that thing, but the animation was being done up in Vancouver. But I found out that, these episodes we were creating were costing, I don't know, $280,000 an episode. And they were, by selling it to different markets all over the world, like 40 or 50 different countries, they were able to recoup about half of that cost per episode. So it's like, how on earth can they make money? And, I was always sensitive to that just from my days as a meat truck driver, because it was like, yeah, I had to make a profit somehow. And so I thought, if these guys, if Warner Brothers, they're not doing this for their own health, they're doing it so they can make money. So we have to be able to meet their budget. Well, we didn't meet their budget. We exceeded their normal budget. I think they were probably paying, I don't know, $300,000 an episode or something to have it done overseas. And we came in a little above that. But in the end, I guess they made the decision that it was worth it. I was thankful for that, but that was the decision they had to make. But, yeah, go ahead.
No, I just want to add that. So John came in, showed up at Warner Brothers one day. He really was sort of given the bum's rush because the powers that be there, they knew about, we do some work here, then at some point we send it to Taipei or to Tokyo or to the Philippines, and then we get the footage back. And that's how we do it here. And so right. The idea of sending it to Chicago,
right,
where, by the way, communication with Chicago is a lot clearer than elsewhere. So
than with the Ozarks.
Yeah, than with the Ozarks. So they just weren't used to sending things in town, and they thought, financially it's not going to work out. But the difference with StarToons is, and it never occurred to me until this very moment that the name StarToons was really appropriate, because what StarToons offered, unlike all these other places, was that animator that had animated Pound Puppies down in Australia, 10 years before. It offered a star animator. Now, not every studio has a star animator, and that's part of the answer to the question that's right here, is the way another studio could come along and really maybe make an impact is they would need to have someone with the brilliance of McClenahan. He really knows how to animate great, fun, beautiful characters. And the team that he gathered together shared that sort of unique and brilliant ability to really animate well. And you look at any of their cartoons throughout the Tiny Toons and Animaniacs episodes, and you see a real special quality. I don't know if there's almost like maybe even an American sassy quality to it, and it really it makes those cartoons really sing. So I would say that StarToons had a star at its head, and it made a huge difference.
Absolutely,
that's great to hear. It's funny because when I started the studio, I was going to call it Hot Dog Animation, because because I can be a bit of a hot dog, but also I really like hot dogs.
And you drove a meat truck. And you drove
I drove a meat truck, so I had all the hot dogs I needed. And then, but then I was a little nervous, and my brother's wife, Karen, was very good in business. And so I said, I'm thinking about starting a studio. And she says, well, do you have a business plan? I said, yeah, my plan is to not go out of business. and she says, well, yeah, she says, you got to have more than that. And I says, look, I don't have any more than that. I just want to animate. She says, well, what are you going to call it? I said, I'm going to call it Hot Dog Animation. And she says, I don't think that's a good idea. She says, why don't you name it after my maiden name, Star? You could call it StarToons. And so that's how StarToons got its name. I said, okay.
Wow. Okay. Well, there you go. And the name Hot Dog. And if any animation studios want to start up with Hot Dog Studio, apparently that is still available as a name. So there you go. And, well, I think that's a great place to pause because, as Tom was saying, the sassiness of the animation, the liveliness of it, it just really does translate. I can't wait to sit down with everybody once again and really get into talk about Animaniacs. I'm a teacher. I actually just this afternoon just said, you know what, I'm going to put on some Bumby's Mom. Bumby's
Mom.
The kids.
Kelly, you don't like Bumby's Mom?
No, I actually love Bumby's Mom, but it makes me sad.
She's the kids loved that episode, and the sassiness of just Slappy itself. I mean, gosh, StarToons plus Slappy Squirrel is just a perfect, wonderful combination.
That's a good one.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Slappy was a kindred spirit to me. I was, which should tell you some bad things about me, I guess.
Well, we'll get into all that in an upcoming episode. I can't wait to schedule and get and talk once again about all this stuff. And thank you so much, John, for coming on with us. And Tom, thank you again for coming on the show to talk about all this development of the show and everything and all the backstories as always.
Thanks to Joanna Davidovich for recommending and suggesting John for this.
Yes.
She is. I've never met Joanna, but I've seen her on the web, and I'm just amazed at her talent and what a character she is in her own right. And I had no idea that she had been a big fan of our stuff. So, thanks to Joanna.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, there's an example of a star animator that, would be a reason to hire that company because you want to have that great animator involved.
Joanna and I have already made a pact that if there's any project we can work on together, we're going to do it.
Wow.
Good.
Let's start gathering a budget.
Yes.
Sounds good.
We'll have to wrap it up for today. We're all out of time, but I promise folks, we will get back together to talk all about the Animaniacs. And for right now, let's go to get to any contact information or anything like that you might want to plug that might be online. Nathan, what about you? Where are you online?
Oh, Joey, I'm on Twitter, of course. Django FT, that's me.
All right. And Kelly, what about you?
I'm also on Twitter, Yoda Princess, YODAPRNCSS.
All right. Tom.
Oh, I'm on Twitter and Facebook and even Instagram. And I think if you look my name up, you'll find me.
Yes. And hopefully, I don't think we're allowed to announce anything at this point, but some cons coming up. Hopefully many this year. You might be lucky enough to see Tom Ruegger at one of your conventions in your city. So if you'd like to bug Tom in person, let your local convention know. and send them on over to the Animanicast. I'll let them know how we can make that happen, okay? Animanicast@gmail.com, by the way. John, how about you? Do you have an online presence that you would like to plug or anything like that?
None whatsoever.
There you go. He's the smartest man.
So if you want to contact me, you're out of luck.
Yes.
He can contact us, and then we can go through the grapevine. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's fine.
There's a lot of squirrels living around his house, I believe. Although it's hibernation season right now, so maybe they're not. But send a note to a squirrel, and they might eventually get it to John.
Yes.
Okay, well, as for the Animanicast, we're on every podcast player. We're on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and other stuff. And hey, animanicast.com. You can go to there and see all of our previous episodes where we talk all about these wonderful Animaniacs episodes that Tom and John worked on together, and much, much more. So for Nathan, Kelly, Tom, and John, this is Joey saying good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
That's edutainment.
Hey, it's been fun.
This podcast is not endorsed by Warner Brothers or Amblin Entertainment and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Animaniacs, Tiny Toon Adventures, Freakazoid, the Warner Brothers logo, all names, pictures, and sounds are registered trademarks and or copyrights of their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of the Animanicast unless otherwise indicated.
Sanctuary! How do you turn her off? I'm still looking for the switch.